Hey guys, how's it going? Sorry about that. The microphone was somehow muted, and I'm wondering when the hell it got muted. That's weird, because I don't remember muting the microphone. Anyways, yeah. Somebody, Scott or somebody is going to tell me if I've actually muted one of the previous videos or not. But anyways, apparently I was boring a few people, so I don't know what the hell that's all about. Just give me a second here while I get myself situated. So, I am between a rock and a hard place now. Now, we have spent quite a few hours, well, I wouldn't say quite a few hours, at least a couple of hours for sure, on where we're heading with this. My son actually knows about something called sprite graphics, and if you're unaware of what sprite graphics are, as you can see, we've been opening up all kinds of things, whether it be help files with various code. That one there is just basic, which is what I used to write the original RTS beta for Run 8. Just basic window was open there, and then I was seeing what this was actually capable of in the free version without having to commit to something else. And I was looking at Train Dispatcher 3 as an example. So there's a lot of interesting things to consider, especially when we're coming along the lines of graphics. And I want to explain probably one of the reasons, I think subconsciously, why, despite everything else, why I've held off doing this, and why I'm so much more comfortable at doing something with the original RTS or RTS2 or whatever. Problem is, the original RTS isn't going to do much. It's just really not going to do much of anything, to say the least. So, some of the things to consider here. I was trying to find. We tried to do a little bit of research to try to find a Yardmaster type display that's in the prototype. I tried finding it on YouTube. It's much easier to find dispatching simulations than it is trying to find a Yardmaster. I forget what the software is called that they use. I heard it at one point, and now I can't remember what exactly it was. But basically, as far as I recall, it is not very animated. I could go with that approach as opposed to what I was originally trying to go for, and that was having these things animate along the line as they were coming in to make it kind of more interesting. The problem with doing that is this is what's known as a sprite. And creating the sprite is okay, but when you're creating sprites with several cars worth, it takes up a lot of resources. It doesn't take up that many resources, but it requires a lot of programming and everything just to keep track of it, and make sure that you can check collision for the lead car, I suppose. And then you get into, do you really need a sprite for it anyways? Because basically it's just a rectangle. Now I could if you were to do, say, something like Freight Yard Manager or Yard Duty, it certainly looks a lot better to have an engine, a bitmap that looks like it. So what the sprites do in Just Basic, for example, and I'm probably not on that. No, I'm looking at the various graphics. Oh, I'm a long ways away. We were looking through the text of the help here. You got circle, box filled. Okay. Yeah, actually, I've already seen some of these. These are some of the various commands for graphics. And I think that was it. Okay. What was a warning? Never mind that. That's okay. So, don't mind me. I'm just filling my face as usual. Doing the graphics commands is going to be not challenging, but a new challenge for me because I've never done it in just basic. The graphics that I have ever done is a long time ago. I'll just give you a brief history. And no, I don't want to bore everybody to this, but I want to explain what we're up against here and how to proceed. I'm weighing now between whether or not it might be easier to go with, well, there's three options. Actually, there's always another option, that is don't do anything. That's the easiest option of all, but it doesn't accomplish anything. So yeah, you could say that. You can do nothing and you know, you're never going to accomplish your goals in life. So life will pass by and each day, week, month goes by and you don't get anything done. What I wanted to do originally was to go the dispatcher route. And I thought about doing that, and then I started thinking about how much I enjoy. Well, for one, I don't think somebody like maybe Scott or others who are interested in the actual switching of trains would be as interested, or the operations of trains would be as interested, because not everybody likes dispatching. So I thought about, okay, well, what if I was to do Yardmaster first instead of RTS Dispatcher? RTS Yardmaster is a little bit different than the Dispatcher. Here's TD3, for example, and this is all paused. Now, what you're seeing here is there is no sprites involved. Everything, whether it be these text windows or whatever, which I have a hard time seeing, quite frankly, on my screen, but I know there's size commands and Windows commands and other things that you can do to make the line draws bigger and everything. So it really doesn't distort the graphics. You can actually zoom in and zoom out, and like here you go. Like here, you can zoom out, you can zoom in. I could probably zoom in even to a bigger level. So that's pretty cool. And I would probably change the zooming function so I can zoom in even further, because on a big screen that's actually harder to see. But back when they created this, they didn't really create it for these types of monitors, like a big high definition monitor. So it's kind of outdated. Now I can use the same approach to a prototypical train dispatcher and do it for a yard system. I think what would happen if I went with that approach, these squares would go away, and then each segment. So I was saying before about XY coordinates. What would end up happening is you would create your segments, and then each spot would have the ability to have text for the car data, as opposed to a square. Now, I don't think the throttle would become an option anymore. I think there would be more of a command-based. Like, if a train was arriving, yes, it would scroll the data and update the screens. So it would update anything that was happening, basically redraw everything. These would become variables. Each and every section would become an array, and they would update it would basically update everything, like the text fields or whatever. So that would be fine. These would become constants because they're not going to change once you write the field and everything. Looking into when I was looking into the GameMaker Studio Pro 2 whatever, I found it was too powerful. It seemed like it was very powerful game engine designed to basically make games. This isn't really a game, it's a simulation, and you're not really... I find it's too powerful for its own good, yet it's not detailed enough for me to get into the core things that I want to get into. So in essence, it's probably not the right thing to try. As I'm thinking about this, and like I said, I'm thinking out loud. I'm still trying to decide where we want to go, and I want to get... Emmett knows how to do sprites. Oddly enough, he's probably has more experience, more recent experience with sprites than I do. But I just don't think doing the sprites is the correct choice. I feel it's a lot of added technicality to a program that really has to run much more efficient. We're not having a 3D simulator, so therefore, what we're dealing with is the operating positions. No, since we're I don't know how the hell we would do industries in that case. I mean, the industries themselves would, the trains themselves would probably switch the industries in an AI form, and they would come back, eventually coming back after so much time. It's kind of like what Train Dispatcher does with some of the work areas. I don't know if I have one in particular here. Edwards might have one, for example. I'm not too sure if they do or not. And I'm not too sure which one I want to use, too. I could... I was thinking of using Barstow. I was thinking of using... something that I'm familiar with. I don't see work areas for Edwards, so I guess that's before the time. So if I go out further... Oh, it should have... Here's a work area. Of course, there's a train in front of it, so it's hard to see it. But we'll use this one, for example. Area, need work. So what happens is, as the train comes in, it reaches that area, and then suddenly it pauses to perform fictional work. So this is where the dispatcher display comes in, and the dispatcher guides how long it takes a train to come in and out. This is kind of why I wanted to do the dispatcher first, because the dispatcher winds up being the backbone of the entire system. The yard is all the yard is for, as far as the Yardmaster is about building trains. And I said this term before. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's an old analogy that's used basically to describe, well, if the egg came first, then okay, so the first thing that ever created, when the chicken first came or came, did it just pop out of nowhere? Was it was it an alien creation? Whether you want spiritual, whatever, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because since eggs come from, since chickens come from eggs, what comes first? You see what I mean? So that's one of those interesting little puzzles of life. So I thought about that in as far as how did I want to do this? Because what happens is, when you look at Train Dispatcher, for example, all these trains, first of all, I mentioned this before, all the trains that are here, and these are symbols you may be used to in, like Modbar and stuff like that, if you're used to operating in the area, you can see all these numbers are meaningless. And in fact, you're looking at it, and you can tell just by looking at it, the numbers are just look random. Not they're not random, but they're somebody created those numbers to put in for those particular lengths. They are constants. They don't change. The only thing that changes, that randomizes, is the ETA. So it randomly, and I was saying before, crew changes sometimes get higher or expire when the train comes on territory. So creating all that actual off area stuff is interesting, because what it does is, when you create a train through the network, what ends up happening is it has to go somewhere and basically disappear for a while. So if you're working a busy, quote unquote busy yard, and you're a yardmaster for the said yard, what you end up doing is you're basically handling the switching operations that takes place, and also handling what you're assigning, what tracks you're assigning for the pickup, what tracks you're assigning for the set-offs. You have a similar train list as far as what trains are coming in. For example, like, I used to be a yardmaster at a model railroad club that I used to belong in, out in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I knew the trains. But it takes experience, because you really have to learn the timing of everything, and what tracks you have available. You have empty cars in certain areas. You have all kinds of things to consider. It's actually it's a totally different experience that isn't really out there other than Freight Yard Manager. So this is why the Freight Yard Manager influence came to me, because I thought, well, I don't want to create maps to have just an industrial area or something like that, because really the industrial areas don't have yardmasters. Yeah, it might have a plant manager or a plant switching manager or something like that. So yeah, it's possible, but really, as far as assignments, like what track we're going to use for loads, or what tracks you're going to use for storage and stuff like that. So I mean, it is possible, but any industry isn't going to have as much requirements for a yardmaster other than actual real yards that have trains coming in and out all the time. Those are the ones that are going to require the yardmaster the most. Some of your basic run-of-the-mill yards, like something like I don't know, like a small 5-track yard with maybe one train that sets off in it. Like, for example, in the southeast on Run 8, if you were to go to one of those yards, one train serves, it's going to drop off stuff, and that's about it. I'd rather deal with a bigger yard, something that's going to have blocking that's required, stuff like that. If that makes sense. I don't know. I'm kind of mumbling here because I'm trying to think about how I want to do this. And apparently, like I said before, I heard there was comments of boring and all this other stuff. It's just like, well, I don't see the comments anyways, so I don't care. Had what was it? Scott not mentioned it, I wouldn't have even, like, I don't care about what the comments are, honestly. If you guys want to ask questions, as I've said in my disclaimer of all my videos, go on the Wikia and ask. So that's basically the way I handle things. So I don't know, and I want it interesting for me as well, because I'm just trying to think as far as various yards. Like, I mean, Mojave isn't even much of a yard that requires a yardmaster. I mean, Bakersfield, yeah, that's Bakersfield has 2 yards. Those ones, I would say, and I'm using examples for California just because I'm so used to running it. Those are ones that could use Yardmasters. Barstow certainly, even with with the hump and all that other stuff. I was thinking about the hump too, and if I actually want to incorporate something big like that right away. Um, the hump's interesting, actually. Actually, the more I think about the hump, that actually might be a good place to start because now you're dealing with something that um, hmm, that's a pretty extreme way of doing it, but it certainly makes things a lot more interesting, I would say. Because I'm either the only experience that I really have as far as um, like switching of yards. I know we used to back in the day, back in the earlier the version one before the hump came into play. We used to build and split trains up at the old yard in Barstow. That was the way we used to do it because there was no other way to do it, and we were able to do it okay. And we sure enough we did it for a long time. It was a lot of work actually, but back then Run 8 was fairly new still, and it was just a real cool feeling, and the sound was nice, and the graphics for me was right, and the operation was nice. Everything was really cool and fun to do. I still swing around back to the whole what is there I can do for RTS2. And I talked about it earlier today because, or I talked about it yesterday actually, because RTS2 was something that that's the easy that's well, it's not the easiest way. The easiest thing to do, for me to do is to just not do anything. And I've been doing it for so long, and I'm so bored right now. I mean, I was just watching my son say, "Hey, you go on Twitter while I'm upstairs." I'm like, "Yeah, well, I could." And I did, and then I got bored, and then I said, "Well, yeah, I'm going to do a live stream because I'm still trying to work things out." And there's no wrestling on this weekend. There's no, like I mean, yeah, okay, I can go on a server, but my son's not interested in Run 8. Well, we can play a game. I can play the racing game. I can do all kinds of things. But I really want to create something. So it's better that he seems to be interested in creating something, but now I have to figure out what is it I'm going to create. The hump actually might be an interesting first step, actually, because then I can operate on what I know from Barstow, and maybe I can even use Run 8 as a pseudo template. What I mean by that is I use Run 8 as whatever some of the old trains I had, or whatever, and just basically run the hump and see how it operates, and then from there try and mimic it. What would it look like on a actual computer panel in the yard office? That I don't know. I don't know how they look like, but I can imagine that once the cars come off the hump and eventually they settle and couple, the tracks, basically the tracks would be showing up. The train IDs would actually be showing up. What I was saying comes from the AEI tags would actually start showing up into the bowls. I don't need to animate those. In other words, I don't need to animate each and every step it takes as it's going down the bowl. It's certainly visually nice to do so, and I can certainly create the sprites, but creating the sprites isn't necessary for me. It's already much less quality eye candy than a 3D simulator, so why even bother doing it for a 2D when I can just go ahead and do the simulation part? and you're basically standing by and waiting for, you're waiting for the train. Maybe have occupancy indications that the train is, in the track, possibly with speed information or something like that. I can do something like that. I would imagine have a speed indicator, ETA, like how long he's got left, or how many feet he is away from set off, or stuff like that. I could have at least a countdown, so you're seeing all these things, and you're able to plan things. But I don't even know if an ETA. I've never been a big fan. What happens in TD3 is they actually give you ETAs. Like, see, there's right there. That's an ETA 1300. That ETA, I'm looking for it. No, that's an estimated time at departure. Some of these trains are. This one's a good one, probably. Yeah, ETA 1302. So this tells me when he's going to get to. I guess it's this guy here. This tells me when he's going to get to the end of the block, which is currently a red signal. And of course, none of this is running right now. And eventually, all of these start moving around. And you start seeing the things. The train dispatching is much more. Yardmasters is much more planning, where train dispatching is a little bit of planning, but there's a lot of monitoring. So you have a lot of data in front of you to monitor. Whereas a Yardmaster is all about planning more than monitoring. The only time there's the monitoring going on is when you're getting ready to assign the switcher to come out, and they kind of do their own thing anyways. You can set it up for a queue to have the switcher come out once so-and-so has departed. Or you can have the trim set up to come into the bowl once the last hump has stopped, type thing. So there's a lot of things I can do that way. I don't have any reference to go on what a yard, the only thing I have is Yard Duty Freight Yard Manager as a reference to go on to how the yard would operate, how it would look on the screen. I do have a reference on how the train dispatcher looks like, because here it is. Can I make it better? Can I do something like that? I think I certainly could, and at least I know how I would have to do it. It wouldn't be sprites, and scaling this to make it actually viewable would be a nice step, especially for big screen monitors. I don't know how many of you guys have big screen monitors and sit back from a screen, but I can't even read the text from here. It's such difficulty for me to even read the text that I can't even get into Train Dispatcher, especially on a big simulation like this. I mean, I can scroll over and read the text up here. But I cannot read that text. I can read that here, no problem. I can read all of that, no problem. I can obviously read the control points. No, that's a hotbox detector. I can certainly see the colors of the signals, how many trains are stacked. So all that information is there. That's not a big deal. It's the car tag or the train tag information, which is, it just doesn't. I'd have to go right up to the screen. And a lot of people do what I do, and that is run a game on a big screen TV like I do. I've been doing it for years. Run 8, I think it looks great. I think a lot of other games look great as well. The only thing I could say is sometimes in Run 8 it's hard to read the milepost. And I'm actually a little closer now than I was in my old apartment, so I can actually almost read those, but still not quite. So it's hard to say what I'm going to do here. I wanna do it, but at the same time, maybe I just might focus on the data side of things, and work with the data first, and then see if I can have something that builds the trains. I already have the RTS beta. Maybe that's the way I have to go. Maybe I should finish. Maybe I should finish some of the ideas I have for the beta, and maybe I should go ahead and because here's the reason why I say maybe I should, and I'm trying to talk myself in and out of different things, and I will do one or the other. The option of quitting and just ending, that ain't happening. I got my son involved now. It ain't happening. So we're going to talk. He's going to come down in a few minutes. It's 9:54. We're going to talk, and then I'm going to try to decide which way I want to go with this. I'd like to go... honestly, I would like to finish off RTS, the original RTS, and get it going for version 2, and not care what about... not even care what happens with version 3. So I think that's probably the easiest thing I could do other than quitting, is go that route and at least get the car forwarding elements that I've always wanted to include. Maybe deal with some of the commodities. I know Scott has mentioned commodities. Maybe deal with some of the economics, possibly. Though economics is not my major concern. I know Emmett likes it. Maybe Emmett would like our Run 8 if the economics was involved. I don't know. I'll have to talk to him about it and say, you know, hey, this is what I got in mind. Do you want to throw some of your economic ideas in and see how you like it? And Scott, if you're watching this, let me know exactly some of the things we could do for Run 8 in if we do RTS, how we can make it. Because once I have those car forwarding elements, with or without Run 8, then I can move on and create the kind of things that I want. I actually do want to eventually get over into the dispatcher and the Yardmaster, though. I did want to do the dispatcher for some time for Run 8, and I never really got an opportunity to, because and that was the external dispatcher. So maybe the dispatcher would be the next element. Maybe Yardmaster is not quite at that stage yet, and maybe I should just focus on the RTS beta and possibly rewrite it a little bit, make it a little bit better. If I do it, then perhaps maybe I'll show you some of the things, what we have going on for it, and I'll live stream the beta, because like I said before, the RTS beta is not going to be payware. If I'm going to upgrade the beta, I'll probably do it live stream. So I might be back later on, and maybe we'll go through it. Maybe we'll see what we can do and fix it up a little bit and see what we can do there. But anyways, that's it, because I'm being paged. So anyways, I might be back on later tonight. We'll have a good one. We'll talk to you later. Take care.